Got something a little bit different here for you today, guys. I know we didn't really do this with the High Elves, and maybe this is something that we can do in the future here. But today I want to go over Naggaroth, and Naggaroth, as we know, is the home of the Dark Elves, and that's all of the elves that, of course, followed Anarion after the all the elves that followed Malekith after the Sundering, which is the large civil war that happens after the death of Anarion, and he gets passed over for leadership for the Phoenix Crown, the rulership of Ulthuan. So today what we're going to do is go over the land of Chill for the Dark Elves, and that is, of course, Naggaroth. And this is the only portion of the campaign map that we've not seen in Total War Warhammer 2. We've seen Lustria, we've seen Ulthuan itself, but we've seen just glimpses of far-off Naggaroth as they did the campaign flyover. We've seen what suggested were Dark Elf troops, again, in the distance, but we don't know anything detail-wise about the land of Chill. So I want to kind of go over today Naggaroth and all the 6 major cities that fill the Dark Elf territory, because the Dark Elves kind of have the same dynamic that the High Elves have, where you've got the different realms of Eataine, of Everse, you've got Trace and Illyrian, and all these places that derive certain attributes and also units for the High Elf armies. It's very similar to that, or it's almost mirrored exactly that way with Naggaroth. So let's jump in here, and I want to start off right now with an overall arc, I guess you could say, flavor of what Naggaroth itself is like, and then we'll go into each individual city, and we'll follow along on the map so you guys can see and get an idea of where these cities are in relation to the entirety of the continent, as well as Ulthuan and Lustria that we're going to be seeing in Total War Warhammer 2. So to kick it all off with Naggaroth here, like the continent as a whole, it itself is northwest of Ulthuan, and it's really more of a direct west shot, but we'll just say northwest, with Lustria being directly to the south. Naggaroth and Lustria mirror North America and South America. In fact, the majority of the Dark Elves or inhabited what would be northern Canada. The Dark Elves inhabit the area around the Sea of Malus and the Sea of Chill. And the rest of the region, for the most part, what would be the US and Mexico, is actually predominantly inhabited by beastmen, marauders, and greenskins. And that's what we can really probably expect to see them as rogue armies that are going to be inhabiting and dotting the rest of Naggaroth. With the northern regions, like I was saying, are more icy and frigid, and the southern regions having a lot better soil. And what that really means is that the southern regions around Clar Karond and Hag Graef are going to be filled with more trees, and the Dark Elves really have plantations that they've used all their slaves to harvest all their menial labor. Dark Elves do not do any labor at all. Anything menial, anything building related, anything harvesting related, they leave to their slaves, which is the majority of the economy of the Dark Elf society. They use slaves to barter with, and then all of it comes through Karond Kar, as we'll discover and talk about. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. But the Naggaroth itself it's got 6 heavily fortified cities. And you've got Naggarond, which is essentially the capital, Ghrond, Karond Kar, Hag Graef, Har Ganeth, Clar Karond. That's all 6 of them. And each one, like I was saying, has got its own flavor, its theme, its emphasis, and ruler under Malekith, the Witch King. And we've seen Malekith in the reveal trailer that we saw. He was the guy with the great golden mask. And I'm actually thinking of making a video separate, just going over Malekith and Marathai. So that's something that you guys are interested in, do let me know. I'm probably just going to be doing it anyway. But that goes over Naggaroth itself as a whole. But now let's just jump into the actual the capital here as we zoom in Naggarond, and this is what is also known as the Tower of Cold, and it's the capital city of Naggaroth under Malekith. Malekith is the rule because this is, again, the capital city of Naggaroth. And it's nestled right here in the Iron Mountains, as you can see, right in the foothills. And this is the place where You have a large amount of sacrifices to Cain. There's a good deal of military recruitment going on. A lot of opulent mansions and everything. And everything in the Dark Elf society is got that opulence. They're very arrogant, just like their High Elf cousins, but they're a lot more twisted in their approach to that opulence. A lot of that involves intrigue, or involves torturing or manipulating other people. A lot of the Dark Elf society is hinged upon pushing someone down so that you look better, or outright killing another individual. There's no qualms in that. In fact, Malekith really only cares about himself, and he really doesn't care what happens in Naggaroth for the most part, as long as it doesn't affect his plans as a whole. So you have a lot of thievery, a lot of villainy in general, just going about the entirety of Naggaroth as a whole, for the exception of one city. But in Naggaroth is the Black Tower, and it's really the home of what you would consider the royal court of Naggaroth. And Malekith likes to keep his inner circle close, but you can really kind of see that as we've described Malekith, that's a double-edged sword. Sure, you're close to him, and you're within his good graces, and the books really describe him as someone who's really benevolent and humble, generous when you are in his good graces. But if you are not, he is just exacting and quick with his revenge. He will kill you outright. He'll demolish your entire household and kill everyone you've ever loved. Like, it's just this very polar opposite, like split personality almost individual. But that's what I guess what happens when you walk through the flames of Assyria and just get burnt to a crisp. Oh, spoiler alert! That's why he's covered in armor from head to toe. But in Naggaroth, and what we're going to see here is the first real iconic unit that comes from one city, and that's going to be the Black Guard of Naggaroth. They are the ones that defend the Black Tower of Naggaroth itself, and the Black Guard are the mirror, the opposite to the Phoenix Guard. And we cover both of them in the High Elf lore video and the Dark Elf lore video, both of which you'll see at the end of this video. I'll link them there in the end screen. But where the Phoenix Guard are these somewhat holy in the sense of the Elvish word holy. The Black Guard are not that way. As I've talked about, they're kind of like they have these towers in which they train in, and they compete against one another, almost like a Dark Elf version of Harry Potter. And they're very malicious, and they're not malevolent. I'm sorry, not the word I wanted to use. But yes, they're very malicious, and they're aimed at just taking others down. And they don't have that sense of overall benevolence that you get from Phoenix Guard, who are quiet. They know their end is coming. They have a quiet kind of assurance to themselves. But that's the Black Guard of Naggaroth, who are inhabiting again that tower that's defending, or that they are defending the tower that Malekith takes residence in. And it's really kind of sad the way they describe the tower itself, because the first levels are a little more decadent, a little more, I don't want to say opulent to overuse that word, but opulent in the High Elvish way. When he separated from Ulthuan, he was saying, I'm going to make a mansion that's unlike any other mansion or any other tower that ever existed ever in Ulthuan. And eventually, though, the fapperies of that kind of stuff, like eventually just kind of faded away from him. He didn't get as interested in that, because he kind of fell away from the High Elf approach to architecture and beauty and art, and more just like a cold, emotionless individual. So the first levels are a lot more of that decadent Baroque kind of style, but very faded, very, very covered in dust now at this point. Dilapidated, not much upkeep going on. The top levels, on the other hand, are more filled with Dark Elf plunder from all the raidings and whatnot that go on, and a little bit more of a Dark Elf approach in the sense that it's a little more twisted the higher you go up. And they talk about his inner sanctum being only reserved for Malekith himself, and there's kind of a cold chill that falls about it because he doesn't surround himself with fire, as you would have guessed from a man burned head to toe in fire. He kind of just uses the runes and whatnot that he's inscribed upon the walls to glow, to give an eerie glow to the entirety of the inner sanctum of the Black Tower. He has this. He spends most of his time toiling and planning and looking over the entirety of the world. Malekith almost has this Sauron feel, the Sauron of Ulthuan, if you want to say. And he's has this constant brooding mentality about him because he's always trying to find a plan to get back at Ulthuan and get to Ulthuan and rule it again. One last thing, though, there's at that top of the inner, towards the inner sanctum, is what's basically a round table of obsidian with 100 seats in it, and that's where his royal court, quote unquote, kind of takes residence, with his throne in the as the head of the table, the head of a circular table. But you understand what I mean. But that's Naggaroth in its whole, and you get this very dark and very sinister sounding castle, fortress that Malekith takes up residence in. But very close to Naggaroth is Ghrond, or the North Tower, and it's got a couple characteristics that are not in Naggaroth. And like I said, every single one of these is going to have a certain amount of characteristics, maybe about their economy, or maybe about their units involved. But Ghrond itself can almost be seen as the twisted mirror to the Tower of Hoeth in Safari. It's got a strong mining community. It's said that you can buy the loyalty of all the Dark Elves in Naggaroth with the amount of gold in the mines underneath Ghrond. And it's ruled over by Morathi, who is the hag sorceress of Naggaroth. And Morathi is, as we talked about before, Malekith's mom. There's some like hints here and there that like Malekith and Morathi maybe did the horizontal tango or whatever it is you do in the Dark Elf world, but that's just kind of a weird thing. Like in the books, it's really weird. Like Morathi talks about how Malekith reminds her so much of an Aryan, and then when Morathi meets Tyrion, she falls almost in love with him because of the sight of him is just like an Aryan, until she kind of like snaps out of it and goes, "Oh, that's right, I'm a near naked crazy bitch," but still whatever. So again, ruled over by Morathi, and she deals very heavily in chaos magics and affairs. There's a lot of like the Battle of Finneval Plains. Morathi actually brings an army of demonettes and of chaos marauders to Ulthuan's coast. So there's a lot of dealings with chaos because Ghrond is actually the northernmost bastion against chaos. There's these watchtowers that watch over the chaos wastelands, but Ghrond is essentially the mainstay of all of it, and it's constantly under chaos siege. There's always beasts at the gates. It's all nonstop warfare there. Despite the fact that it is the Coven of Sorceresses takes up residence in Ghrond, so you would expect it to be a little bit more retreated from the front lines, quote unquote, kind of like how the Tower of Hoeth is, and Safari and Ulthuan is a little bit more secluded and it has a little bit less interaction with the entirety of Ulthuan. Ghrond is right there in the forefront, the vanguard against chaos, I guess you could say. But the Coven of Sorceresses is basically where all the sorceresses practice the majority of their magic, so they learn a lot of their skills and spells. And there's a story that Naggaroth was carried over from Naggaroth, which is in Ulthuan, and Malekith did it with his own magic, and the sorcerers, the male sorcerers of Ghrond, in kind of like a hey, we're better at magic than you, to Malekith, put it just a little bit further north than Naggaroth. And so Malekith, being a very mild-mannered, very easygoing and understanding individual, killed every single fucking one of them and banned sorcerers. And there's some lore books that talk about how Malekith bans them more out of the fear of their potential that he might usurp him, because he is the ruler of Naggaroth, uncontested. He can never have that contestation there. So he is there to stay. There's all these kind of luxurious palaces in Ghrond. The luxurious paladins of decadence is basically one of the keeps that Morathi takes up residence, and there's a lot of there's this inner sanctum that very few males are allowed to ever enter, and when they do, they're more or less damned and cursed, because at that point, sure, they get access to a wealth of ecstatic and erotic pleasures, but at the same time, they'll never kind of be the same, because it's like that moniker of, oh, you don't have sex on ecstasy. It's like that kind of situation where, oh, I'll never have an equally pleasurable experience in my life. And again, Dark Elves are a very visceral community. They torture because they enjoy the sadistic pleasure from it, and they have sex because they enjoy the pleasure of it. It's all the sins of the flesh are manifest in the Dark Elf society. So you kind of have like a mantis queen over here in Morathi, and a lot of the men in Ghrond continuously fight for the hopefully catching her eye or her affection, and that's kind of the backbone of the driving force for Ghrond is getting trying to get the Morathi's bewitching beauty onto their side. But we'll move a little further east now and a little south to Har Ganeth, which is the city of executioners, or the city of Cain, depending on whichever one you want to call it. Flying along this lovely road of skulls. But Har Ganeth you can really see as the religious capital of Naggaroth. It's got many pilgrimages in Cain's name happen to Har Ganeth. And Cain, as we've talked about, is the major patron god of the Dark Elves. The elves have many gods in their pantheon, Assyrian being one of them, Cain being another, and also Anathrama being another one. We've seen them with wood elves. And the Dark Elves do dabble with that, and we'll go into that a little bit, but Cain is who they primarily worship, the god of blood, the god of murder. So in Har Ganeth, you can imagine what a city dedicated to that god would be like. But contrary to that, it's the only place in Naggaroth with truly a law, like a law system. And because Har Ganeth was actually cursed by, I wouldn't say cursed, but blessed, depending on who's looking at it, by Cain to just perpetually be a city of blood-mad warfare and destruction. So people in the streets are just murdering each other until these laws come into place. And the punishment for this is execution, outright. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You're taken to the tallest temple of Cain in Har Ganeth, and you have your head cut off by an executioner. That easy. And what it does is it kind of changes the game for the Dark Elf Society, right? So Dark Elves in Naggaroth or Ghrond, when they are the nobles, the dreadlords, or the upper echelon in general, their intrigue is a little more direct. They're just going to outright kill you. But in Har Ganeth, it's different. It's a little more manipulative. They're trying to trick you into breaking the law rather than breaking the law to get you killed, because they've realized that, okay, yeah, I can go and kill Dreadlord Bob over there, but Dreadlord Bob I'm going to somehow get linked back to that murder, and then I'm going to get murdered myself or get killed myself. So it's all about tricking Bob into accidentally stealing that pack of gum, because I know there's one fact that I know that's in these books is that Dark Elves fucking love big red gum. Or maybe not really, but still, point remains. It's all about tricking them into breaking the laws. And the ruler of this city and the I guess you could say primogenis of these laws is Helebron, the Blood Queen of Har Ganeth. And she obviously has immunity to these laws because she created all of them. But she also sells that immunity to people, so she's very opportunistic, as are all Dark Elves. So part of the economy being slavery and being warpstone, as we'll get into soon, but also kind of being favors. You know, what can you do for me to make your life better and my life better at the same time? So with all that, though, you've got one single night. It's called Death Night, and it's typically only celebrated by witch elves throughout the entirety of Naggaroth. But in Har Ganeth, little bit different. The gates are sealed. Slaves and all slaves and prisoners are released, and just anarchy reigns. No rules. You're allowed to kill anyone, steal from anyone, do whatever the hell you want. And the books talk about how like the gutters fill up with corpses of these slaves and these prisoners, but also of your enemies. You know, this is a night for you to really kind of lash out and try and get someone without the pain of death because you've broken the law. So this is, again, everyone taking part in it in Har Ganeth, not just the witch elves. So we've seen that obviously the witch elves take up a major residence here in Har Ganeth, with Helebron being an actual special character around the witch elves. We've got in Har Ganeth as well the home of the executioners, led by Tularis. There was this great elf siege that happens in the earlier Dark Elf timeline, and as a result, it's just this massive siege, and there's these bodies that are piled what they describe as sky high, and Tularis takes in like this. He gets in this blood rage, and he takes his what's called a drach, and beheads a captive in one like fell swoop, and that becomes kind of the token weapon of executioners. When we've seen them in the Dark Elf lore video, there's these they have these very long great weapons called a Drach, and that Drach is what kind of how it really gets its name is, or not from its name, is how it gets its iconic, I don't know what you want to call it, place, is because of Tularis here, who's really the kind of the leader and the very first real executioner. But from Har Ganeth, we're going to take a little swim over the Sea of Malus. We're going to go up over the Blacklight Tower into the Sea of Chill, which has, again, no chill, and plop right into Karond Kar, or the Tower of Despair, or the Slaver's Gate, as it's called. And it's really kind of like Naggaroth Russia. It's located on the Sea of Chill, like on the Sea of Chill, exactly on that little like peninsula / islandette right there. And it's just battered constantly by icy gale force winds. It's so cold that they actually kind of get bothered going to the more temperate regions like Hag Graef or Clar Karond. The inhabitants of Karond Kar are considered the hardiest of an already hardy race, and it's a really cool part of the Dark Elf society because all the raiding parties dock here. All the slaves come through Karond Kar, and there's this part in the book where it talks about basically from boat to like the trading bazaar, you might not even make it as a slave. You might get picked apart. Someone might pick you from the crowd and kill you. It's just all sorts of scum and villainy going through Karond Kar. Not to sound like tattooing, but still kind of like that in a weird way. And so slave trade is extremely high in Karond Kar. A lot of slaves come out of this region and into the entirety of Naggaroth as a whole. And it's got just tons of thievery, assassination, really the polar opposite of Har Ganeth, which is ruled by even a loose law system by Dark Elf standards. Karond Kar, again, anarchy reigns supreme here, just like it does in the majority of the other Dark Elf cities. But it's the home of the Black Ark Corsairs, and these guys are the raiding masters who also kind of double as mercenaries for the Dark Elves. And I apologize here, I didn't go into this as much, but for the executioners, but the Corsairs, you can look at as the mirror of the White Lions of Trace. The White Lions of Trace have a great weapon. They have their cloak that confers a bonus to missile attack as well as an additional bonus to them as a whole. But the polar opposite to that is your Black Ark Corsair, again, who has got their C-scale cloak as well as their two weapons. So rather than having clearly a great weapon, they've got the two weapons, which I would look at as maybe like an anti-infantry characteristic latched onto them, not really sure. And just to kind of touch on the executioners and what their polar opposite is, they're going to be something like the Swordmasters of Hoeth. They're the ones that are going to be, they're kind of exact polar opposite for the most part. They both are in armor. They're both wearing, they both have these large great swords that just cut people up. And I see the same mechanic are going to be equated to both of them, where it's going to be an AP mechanic on them, maybe an anti-large as well, who knows, maybe anti-infantry depending on how they are. But I just wanted to go into that real quick because I didn't touch on those, and I'll remember them going forward. I apologize about that. But so Karond Kar, home of the Corsairs like we were talking about, but also there's a high amount of Beastmasters who train the beasts of the Black Spine Mountain, which are very far to the southwest of here, but there are a lot of them. In the earlier versions of the Dark Elf army books, we had a really famous Beastmaster named Hubris Rakarth, who we would kind of consider the former ruler of Karond Kar. He was considered the greatest Beastmaster of Naggaroth, but he did die in the Battle of Finuval Plains, and I think we lost him around, I want to say 4th or 5th edition. Those of you that have played Dark Elves from day one, let me know when you saw Hubris Rakarth fall out. He was the guy who was on the old Dark Elf Dragon, if you remember. So, the one that was pre-Malekith. But, he dies in the Battle of Finuval Plains. So that kind of wraps up Karond Kar, the Slaver City, or Slaver's Gate. We'll move down here to what we've kind of talked about in the overall, what's it called? overview of Naggaroth, and that is Clar Karond, and it's the Tower of Doom. So this is the chief shipyard of Naggaroth, and it's less of a normal city than the other 5 cities so far, or 4 cities, soon to be 5th or 6th one coming up now. But it's more sprawling. It stretches from with the Red Venom River to Dusk Ridge, and what that really means is it's going to be a lot larger and more of an expansive city, because there's slaves that are constantly harvesting the black wood used to create the Black Arcs. And the Black Arcs are these large ships that the Dark Elves use for their raiding parties or their invasions onto Ulthuan and the such. And they're these massive floating cities that are really, really, really cool. But as the city expands as there's more deforestation. And as that continues, of course, is becoming a massive city fortress. Just like the rest of them are more of a city fortress, this is this large, sprawling city fortress. So it's very maze-like, and it's rebuilt on top of itself multiple times, destroyed buildings, abandoned districts, all in the pursuit of saying, oh, we can make this better now. Let's make this like this. So that's the overall makeup of Clar Karond. But Clar Karond also is the true home to the Beastmasters. The Shrine of Anatharama resides within Clar Karond, and that's where the Blackspine Mountains are closest to Clar Karond than they are any other Dark Elf city. And the Blackspine Mountains, though, are where they get the cold ones are in the Blackspine Mountains, the manticores, the harpies, and they get a lot of these nests and pens in Clar Karond. In fact, Clar Karond is where the Beastmasters summon Charybdis from the Sea of Malus to actually fight for the Dark Elves. So all of the Beastmasters really kind of call their home to Clar Karond. And there's not really a comparable unit in the High Elf faction, because the High Elves don't employ beasts in the same way that the Dark Elves do. I would say the High Elves kind of have more of a relationship with the monstrous units that they've got, with their phoenixes, their great eagles, their griffins, with their dragons. But with the Dark Elves, with their manticores, their black dragons, Charybdis, the Hydra, manticores, harpies, it's more of an enslavement almost, and goading them into combat. And I think that we've already have a rampage mechanic with Lizardmen, and I would see that kind of coming over to the Dark Elves, because the Beastmasters need to control these beasts so that they can fight. Usually Beastmasters are mounted on top of manticores, though, so that might be an option depending on if they do that for Total War Warhammer 2. But I kind of get a hold of myself here. They sold, the Beastmasters of Clar Karond sold Hag Graef, the place we're getting to right now, its first cold ones. So we'll go now into Hag Graef, the Black Crag. So it's a very ominous city. It's situated at the bottom of a very deep canyon, surrounded on all sides by mountains. So it's almost always nighttime at Hag Graef. And there's 8 grand towers that dot the skyline and really kind of act as the habitation for all the Dark Elves within. And the city itself, though, underneath all of these 8 towers, is riddled with warpstone mines. Just fucking pockmarked with them. And the slaves harvest everything there. What's really important, though, is warpstone is corrupted. It's very twisted, and being in proximity to it actually gives you warpstone poisoning and can affect you mentally. It can corrupt you in a demonic, chaotic sense. That's why Skaven huff that shit like no one's business. But the warpstone actually reanimates slaves that have died in the mine. So they basically work themselves into literal dust. So it's really kind of cool imagery, as the city itself is relatively pitch black with nothing but the ominous glow of warpstone underneath to really kind of light it up, outside of the obvious fires here and there. But it's a very kind of cool imagery that they paint in the book, and it's really their main source of trade. It's a highly valuable resource everywhere in the Warhammer world, or Old World, Araby, Ulthuan, Lustria, Naggaroth, all of it. It makes me... Well, I'll get to conspiracy theories in the conclusion of this, but we'll go into Warpstone a little bit more and its importance. But it's really the second best city in Naggaroth behind, and best is in heavy quotes there, behind Naggaroth. In fact, because the city is so dark and so destitute and so just crappy, it's got no shortage of volunteers to join military. In fact, it has the most disciplined fighters in the realm. Escape, of course, they just want to escape their homeland. They act more as mercenaries than anything else, barring, of course, an actually unified Dark Elf force, just to get out of Hag Graef. So they have one of the highest productions of warpstone and the highest productions of soldiers to the rest of the Naggaroth. And we've talked about these 8 grand towers, and in filling those 8 towers are 8 ruling families. And it's talked about how they could actually overthrow Malekith, but the natural intrigue of Dark Elves kind of keeps that at bay, and Malekith knows that. He constantly kind of pulls the strings here and keeps them fighting each other, so they never have a chance to unify and take over Naggaroth and eventually overthrow Malekith, because they control the majority of the military power in all of Naggaroth. And the most favored position amongst them is the first Dreadlord. The first Dreadlord gets to control the trade tariffs and all sorts of money coming in and out, so it gets more or less act as a middleman, driving tons of money to him and his house. And it's really, we've talked about every single place having a home, quote unquote, for a special unit. And Hag Graef is where we find the home of the Cold One Knights and the Canine Assassins. Assassins being used primarily to remove targets of these 8 ruling families so that each one can get ahead of the other. And the Cold One Knights obviously coming from the disciplined and cold and effective warriors that are coming out of Hag Graef as a whole. And they're riding on the cold ones given to them from Clar Karond, as we've discussed. One thing I want to talk about with Hag Graef, it being A, my favorite Dark Elf city, and B, being resident to my favorite Dark Elf special character, Malus Darkblade, who is really kind of like the de facto ruler, quote unquote. I don't want to call him the first Dreadlord because I haven't seen that in any of the lore I've looked up on him, but he could be considered that, I guess you suppose. If some of you know and have read the Darkblade series, let me know, because there is a really great book series on Malus Darkblade that talks about him and how he gets possessed by Tazarkon and his expeditions into the Chaos Waste, and he has to get these 5 artifacts to free himself from a demon's possession, and the demon kind of tricks him and everything. It's a really awesome lore. He's got a lot of lore behind him, and so many books behind him. He's probably one of the most fleshed out Dark Elf characters, even ahead of Malekith, to be totally honest. But if we were to see him in Total War Warhammer 2, he'd be a very strong melee legendary lord mounted on top of a cold one. But maybe this would be a lord that we could see for beating the Dark Elf campaign, or maybe this is a lord that would be in one of the solo standalone DLCs that they released in conjunction with, okay, maybe we get Malus Darkblade and the Everqueen or something like that to kind of do the double kind of lores that they typically release. But if you guys do want a video on him, let me know. I'd love to flesh out Malus Darkblade, because he's got such a rich amount of lore behind him. He's got a very tragic and kind of, as I like to use, romantic history behind him. It's very, very crazy. He has to kill his dad for one of the artifacts, so there's a lot of craziness and intensity behind the overall history of Malus Darkblade. But that really concludes everything here, guys. That's all 6 of the major cities of Naggaroth. We went from Naggarond all the way in a loop here back to Hag Graef, so hopefully you guys got a good idea of where the Dark Elves inhabit on Naggaroth and on this map in general, and hopefully we'll start to see more of that in the coming months here. It's looking like we're probably going to see a little more Skaven than we are Dark Elves first. I'm surprised at that. I thought we were going to definitely see Dark Elves this month and then probably Skaven next month. And for those of you wondering what a Skaven is, they don't exist. It's a joke. I'm kidding. Don't look them up. But you guys do get a sense here for how similar to High Elf realms each one is, with its own flavor and emphasis, especially unit-wise as well as lore-wise. But it is much larger than Ulthuan, with more rogue factions. I don't see any rogue factions being a part of Ulthuan itself. I definitely see them inhabiting Naggaroth. As we've talked about, there's greenskins, there's marauders, there's beastmen. In fact, the northwestern portion of Naggaroth itself, the continent, absolutely has a huge concentration of beastmen. So it would not surprise me to see that. A little bit of speculation that I have is that we might see some Skaven in the north. They're not talked about in lore being up there. I mean, Clan Pestilence starts in Lustria, so we know that from a lore standpoint, we will probably soon see them on the campaign map. But there's no real lore talking about Skaven in the north here. But it would make sense if they wanted to drop them close to Hag Graef, as that's close to the Warpstone mines. The Skaven. So the Dark Elves use slavery as a main source of trade and economy. The Skaven rely almost entirely on Warpstone to trade with it, the powder to huff it. I mean, I'm not kidding when I say that they like consume it. The Warpstone has a very holy, almost a connotation in the Skaven society. It's very important to them. So maybe the Dark Elf will actually be more inclined to trade and ally with the Skaven than the High Elves, of course. Maybe the High Elves are more inclined to trade and bargain with the Lizardmen, and that's what we'll kind of see as the 2-on-2 of those two. But that's, again, just speculation. But I hope you guys enjoyed this and got a good idea now of how things are really put together in Naggaroth and how the Dark Elf Society both works and is structured. But thanks for watching here, guys. Let me know if there's anything else you'd like to see in the comments, lore-wise. Love to put up more videos that you guys are looking for. But I look forward to putting up some more and hearing some more stuff about Total War Warhammer 2. Take care, guys. Bye.